Well, folks, in today's video, I'm going to be restoring this locomotive. I believe it's a Via Rail FP40. I used to see these things all the time as a kid in this paint scheme, and I have a model of it by Walters. This one's by Lifelike. Unfortunately, this one has some problems. It belongs to Automoto Railfan, and in his collection tour, he ran it for a few seconds and it started smoking pretty badly. So I told him, if you want, I'll fix it for you. This Lifelike is different from most of the ones I've seen. Usually they've got two screws at the bottom, and you just unscrew those and the shell pops off, but you can see tabs on the side, which means this thing will, in theory, pop out. There's the front ones. There we go. There's the shell popped off. It's all pretty normal Lifelike stuff. This is a little bent. In fact, it's in a bit of an odd location. Usually that would be in the front. I'm not sure if this bulb is stock. Usually they have got red and blue wires, just like the ones that go to the motor. I don't know. I've never seen a light like that before. But anyways, the light's irrelevant. What is relevant is getting to that motor. So. Quite sure how I want to get at that. Need some tools here. Hold on. Found a flatheads, which is exactly what we need to take this part out. Note that if you're doing this on a Bachmann, these look very, very similar, but don't be mistaken. They usually have a thing you need to unscrew. On the Lifelike ones, you've just got two tabs in here that you push down, and it will allow the entire motor assembly to pop out. And there we go. We're now going to open this up. I'm hoping that the problem is with the commutator. If it's the commutator, sometimes little bits just get stuck between the plates on the commutator. If it's not the commutator, we need to replace the motor. Because usually, if the commutator goes bad, it will take out the armature on these ring-filled motors. It's just part of the thing about them. Just unscrewing the little screws that go for the go on the tabs for the motor. Note, you want to hold them down and then lift them up really gently because there are springs under there. You can see them right there. But if they're under pressure and all of a sudden the pressure gets released, they pop out and you'll be on the floor for hours searching for them. I learned from experience, so try to do that. So the springs on these are a bit compressed. They've been exposed to a bit of heat. That's usually what causes that. So I'll have to just have a look inside. Gearbox appears to be in very good condition, although when we take these things apart, sometimes we discover things. There's a tiny bit of hair around the wheels, but I've seen far worse. So we're going to unscrew these two screws right here. I could be wrong, but I think on some late model Lifelikes, they didn't put the screws down here because the casing holds it in. I could be wrong about that though. So we're gonna just try to gently take it apart. Sometimes if these things have been exposed to a lot of heat, the plastic is a little warped. But usually, if you just take like a basic knife, you can kind of just wiggle it between them. Be really careful though, because you don't want to stab into the armature, because if you break the wires, the armature is basically junked. Unless you're willing to rewind it, but that's a tricky thing to do. Yep, okay, slowly. And just go do little bits at a time. Don't pry up like crazy at one point, otherwise you might break the plastic. Plastic can usually take quite a bit of stretch, but don't overestimate it. We'll just keep prying up. Whoop. So there we go, we're in. Got a whole bunch of gears. We're gonna take all those out. The lubricant in this thing has clearly gone bad. These gears are a lot stiffer than they should be. They should be able to pop right out. The magnets are still pretty strong. Maybe a problem with the bearings too. Always pull the gears up straight because you don't want to bend that pivot. If you bend the pivot, it will mess a lot of other things up. And there we go. And there goes one of the gears on the floor. I found it. So now that we are in here, we can have a little look at that armature. That would be our problem. That's definitely where the smoke is coming from. You see how you should be able to see specific spacings instead they're all one piece. Somebody likely lubricated this at some point. So that's probably where the smoke is coming from. Well, folks, I apologize for the split in editing there. The camera ran out of memory. But anyways, like I was saying, you don't want the spaces between each of the plates on the commutator to be full of stuff, because if they are, it could mean that somebody put conductive lube on the commutator. If they did put conductive lubricant, it can get caught between the spaces on the commutator. Since it's conductive, it will short, and once it shorts, it will burn the plastic on the commutator. And I've seen this happen so badly sometimes it's completely destroyed the commutator and even the motor, because the burning can actually burn the coils. Speaking of which, always check the coils to make sure there is no burnt looking marks. Sometimes if these coils overheat, they can short and they'll go bad. So each pole should be whatever metal, whatever color, if they're red, green, whatever, just make sure there's no burnt looking marks. Anyways, we're gonna clean this up. So we're going to start by cleaning out the little gaps, and we'll just try to clear any conductive lubricant, and then we'll run some alcohol on this. For a towel right here. And we'll just gently polish up the commutator until it's looking nice and clean. So it's now sometime later, and you can see this is looking a lot cleaner. There are a few permanent burn marks on the commutator, but nothing that will inhibit the electrical connection significantly. One thing I always forget to tell you guys is that you see on the edge of each pole, there's a little bit of green here. On some really old armatures, they don't have any coating, and if they don't have any coating, always check for rust. They should be very shiny because they're made of steel, and one thing I've discovered is that if you have rust on these things, it will inhibit the performance. They'll heat up a lot more, and they'll draw a lot more electricity. But on newer motors, they've usually got a bit of coating that prevents rust, so it's just something I thought I'd share with you guys. So now we can start reassembling the motor and getting this thing back into working order. I'm also going to take out the brushes and clean them, because if they put oil on the commutator, the brushes are likely soaked in it. Here one of the brushes is, and it's kind of hard to see on the camera, but they're way cleaner than they are. You can see how greasy my fingers are just from handling them. And you can see there, all the grease that came up. The brushes were just as bad as the commutator. But we got them fixed, so we can start putting this thing back together. So yeah, off camera I went ahead and just cleaned out all the grease. In these particular Ringfield motor type units, I'd suggest actually not putting grease in them. Grease is just too thick. Grease is really meant for things like worm gears and stuff like that, where you got something with a lot of friction. Gears don't make very much friction, so very basic lube. So anyways, we can start putting this back together. We're going to start by putting the armature back in. By the way, I've only seen this happen a couple times. If you have problems with your magnets, you can put a tiny bit of crazy glue behind them and just hold them down. I've noticed sometimes the magnets can push up against the motor if the plastic is warped, but otherwise it should be okay. We're going to put the littlest amount of lubricant on that bearing. Really don't want much. You don't even want to drop. You just want like enough, just so it's damp with the lubricant. And a little goes a long way. That should be good. Start putting the gears in. Some gears go in before others. This is, in my opinion, where Bachmann messed up, because Bachmann pressure fit the gears onto these little pivots, and as a result their gears have been cracking. Like didn't make this mistake. They just made the gear loose around the pivots, and as a result they haven't had the cracked gears, because the cracked gears make a clicking noise, which is quite annoying, and it's a very common problem. So good work, Team Lifelike, I guess. And with each gear, just put again a little bit of lubricant You don't need much. And that will be plenty. Let's put the main gear on there. Oops, we got a gasket off the motor. These little friction things, they just go around the bearing. They're supposed to keep the motor in line or something like that. I don't know. I'm just going to put the last couple gears in. If you're doing this bit yourself, this is what it should look like before you put the last gear on. Just put your little bit of lubricant. And there you go. So we can now put the back of this on. I'm gonna put the screws in. And I'm gonna clean off these wheels because you can see there's a bit of dust and hair on them. Whenever you're putting one of these things back together, always check the bearings for bits of dust and hair and stuff like that, because even a little piece can actually make quite a bit of resistance. So that's my suggestion. And in each bearing, just put a little bit of lubricant, and it will make a nice difference. And just like that, we can put the bottom truck cover back on. I'm not sure if this has a particular way. Okay, so it has to go on this way because you can see that one's wider than the other one, so. That turns quite well. So now we need to put this thing back in. We're going to need to put the brushes back in, and we're going to need to uncompress the springs. That way they push the brushes in up against the commutator properly. There's probably a more professional way out there to uncompress springs that I'm unaware of. Maybe somebody in the comments will know. What I usually do, put them on a screwdriver and you just pry a little bit, just gently. Not too much because you don't want to stretch them, and you want to try to make this as even as possible. You don't want them to be at weird angles. But you can see there's a, whoops. That's how a spring is supposed to look. Here, I'll show it up close, that way you guys can tell the difference. And there we go, the springs are now uncompressed. So we'll just drop the brushings in. I know a lot of people will suggest to put a bit of lubricant on them. I suggest not. I've just never had good experience with putting lubrication on the commutator, but maybe I'm wrong. But to me, it's just like, it just gets, you know, there are sparks, so it burns it eventually, and then it gets caught between the plates on the commutators, which is ironically exactly what happened with this engine, and almost destroyed the whole motor. So I would suggest not. If you do, don't put much. Now you put the springs in. I suggest putting them in one at a time, then putting one of the plates over it, then putting another in. Because if you do both at the same time, there's a good chance you'll lose one of them. See, even getting one of them in is tricky enough as it is. There you go, get it in the right spot. There you go. Now, the nice thing about these life flakes is you should, in theory, be able just to pop them back into place since you have no plates. And just like that, got that piece back together. I'll see if I can get this light to move forward a little. Just bend it back. And because this way you can tell because the light's on that side. And just like that, engine's back together. Let's go test it now. So we've got her set up on the track. Now let's try giving her a little bit of juice. Change the direction here. Well, it's not rolling smoke all over the place. That's a good sign. Seems to be running pretty smooth. That's also not on very much power. That's on 60%. Let's try giving her a little more. Yeah, I mean, fair enough. Let it do a few laps. It will probably start to pick up speed after a little bit of time of running. It's a few minutes later. It's still running pretty strong. It's not smoking, which is good, because smoking's for steam locomotives. Folks, that's about it for today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed. I was a little concerned at the beginning, to be honest, that this thing was going to be quite tricky to fix, because I was concerned that the commutator and armature were going to be completely burned up, but it turned out it was just a little bit of oil being burned between the commutator plates. So, Automodel Railfan will be getting his engine back soon, hopefully. I'll put a link in the description for his channel if you guys want to go check it out. Until then, thank you guys so much for watching, and there's probably some more content on the way. Probably.